Disclaimer: the video you are about to see has content that contains swearing, substance referencing, violence, and or partial on-screen nudity. If you are a person under 13 years of age, do not watch this video by order of COPPA. In general, if you are over 13 but are sensitive, you may exit this video and find a nice wholesome video to watch. Viewer discretion is advised.
Let's begin! Alright, let's go back to where it all started. Last night, the culprit went to the room where my Zono was. In other words, to my room. More than likely, my Zono invited that person to my room in order to kill them. Using the knife she took from the kitchen beforehand, she attacked that person. But something happened that she didn't see coming. That person struck back at her with the practice sword in my room. A strike from the practice sword broke my Zono's right wrist, ending the battle. And then the knife was stolen from her. Cornered, my Zono panicked and fled into the shower. The culprit went after her, but for some reason, the shower door wouldn't open. The door to my shower is misaligned, and, not knowing the trick, he was unable to open it. My Zono knew because I told her, but of course the culprit didn't know. Even so, the culprit somehow forced the door open, and then, with the stolen knife, he stabbed my Zono. However, with her last remaining strength, my Zono left behind a dying message on the wall behind her back so the culprit wouldn't notice. But in doing so, she expended all of her strength. After murdering my Zono, the culprit hurriedly began destroying the evidence. First, he removed his blood-stained shirt. Then, using my room's lint roller, he cleaned the room from top to bottom to remove any trace of his having visited that room. After that, the culprit headed for the trash room to dispose of his dress shirt. He intended to burn his bloodied shirt in the incinerator there. However, shutters sealed the trash room and he was unable to approach the incinerator. So the culprit used the glass ball Hagakure left in the laundry room. The culprit pushed the incinerator switch by throwing the glass ball through the shutters. For a normal person, that's practically impossible, but the culprit was confident he could do it. After all, the culprit is the super duper high school all-star. He threw the glass ball with precision and control, hitting the switch and activating the incinerator. The culprit, having destroyed the evidence, was relieved and quickly left the trash room. But the culprit wasn't counting on part of his shirt falling out of the incinerator. And so, the culprit remained blissfully unaware that he left behind conclusive evidence. You're busted! Isn't that right, Leon Kawada? Let's begin! Let's go back to before the crime was committed. Last night, Celeste ran into Fujisaki in the dormitory storeroom. Fujisaki was carrying a sports bag with something inside it. A blue tracksuit, yes, and Celeste saw it too. Sports bag in hand, Fujisaki ignored her self-imposed curfew and went somewhere. Fujisaki's destination was the changing room, and the men's changing room at that. But how did the victim, who was supposed to be female, enter the men's changing room? That would be because he was actually a boy. For that reason, he was able to use his own Electro ID to enter the men's changing room. Fujisaki was planning to meet someone in the changing room, and that someone is this incident's culprit. That culprit lightly waited for him to let his guard down, then took the murder weapon, a dumbbell, and attacked him. When he did, some of Fujisaki's blood splattered onto the men's changing room's poster and carpet. It was, in all likelihood, impulsive. There are too few signs of planning for it to have been premeditated. So the culprit hurriedly began planting red herrings. First, he collected the bloodstained carpet, as well as the poster, and brought them along with the body to the women's changing room. Of course, you need a girl's Electro ID to enter the women's changing room, but that doesn't mean the culprit had to have been female. Both Mizono's and Enoshima's Electro IDs are just sitting in the entrance hall. Using one of them, even a guy could gain access to the women's changing room. Having done exactly that to get in, the culprit did something with the carpet and poster he brought. He exchanged them with those in the women's changing room. In other words, he relocated the crime scene. But that's not the end of this case. Meddling from Togami, who discovered the body first, make things that much more complicated. He entered the new crime scene and did something there using an extension cord he brought from the library. That's right, using an extension cord, Togami tied Fujisaki's body up to make it look like a crucifixion. In addition, he used the victim's blood to leave a message on the wall. And he did all this to make us believe Genocider Sho had committed the murder. And at the same time Togami was doing this, the culprit, having disposed of Fujisaki's sports bag, went to the sauna. So he could get rid of the last piece of evidence, Fujisaki's Electro ID. Just as he was hoping, the heat of the sun destroyed Fujisaki's Electro ID. He knew that would happen too. He knew Electro IDs were weak to high temperatures. And that would be because he himself broke his own Electro ID in the sauna. And that's everything that happened. It was you! Isn't that right, Monto Wada? Let's begin! As the first step in preparing for this crime, the culprit joined forces with a certain person. Yamada, By making Yamada into their accomplice, the culprit was able to execute this series of crimes. The first thing they did was invite a certain person to the rec room last night at 1 o'clock a.m. And that person was Hagakure. The culprits called Hagakure there so they could frame their crimes on him. First, they drugged him. Then, they dressed the unconscious Hagakure in the Justice Robo costume. Yamada pretended to be held captive by Justice Robo. And the culprit photographed him. All for the sake of fabricating evidence of a madman and casting suspicion onto Hagakure. After that, the culprit shot Hagakure, still out cold, in the locker by the pool. And at long last, 6 o'clock a.m. rolled around, and the culprits moved into the murder phase of their plan. They summoned Ishimaru to the physics prep room. And there, Yamada committed the first murder by killing Ishimaru. The murder weapon he used was Justice Hammer number 4, the hammer we found in the physics prep room. The use of hammer number 4 for the first murder was a red herring intended to confuse the order of events. The next thing the culprit and Yamada did was fake having been attacked. In doing so, they set themselves up as victims and directed suspicion onto Justice Robo. The first fake attack was in the rec room. By showing us Justice Hammer number 4 and the Justice Robo photograph, the culprit convinced us the attack was real. And then there was the second fake, the attack in the library, was constructed with Yamada's injury and Justice Hammer number 2. In manufacturing and showing us these two incidents, the culprits planted a certain notion in our heads that the mysterious madman was attacking people using progressively larger hammers. And carrying that misconception, we all set out to find the madman as quickly as possible. When we did, we left Yamada in their infirmary all by himself. That was exactly what Yamada wanted, left unattended in the infirmary. He made use of the transfusion bags in the fridge and Justice Hammer number 3 to fake his own death, to make it appear as though he had been murdered. Hearing Yamada scream, we returned to the infirmary and found him there, on the stage of his murder. On top of that, at the very same time, Ishimaru's corpse was discovered in the physics prep room, and because of the corpse discovery announcement that triggered, we mistakenly assumed Yamada to be dead. Having successfully deceived us, Yamada waited for the moment everyone was out of the infirmary, and slipped away. After learning about Yamada's disappearance, we hurriedly regrouped in the infirmary. And making use of that hole in our defenses, Yamada snuck into the physics prep room. Wrapped Ishimaru's corpse in a vinyl sheet and transported it to the art storage room on the trolley. And that's the truth behind the case of the disappearing corpses. But Yamada didn't know the extent of the true culprit's plan, that he'd been manipulated. The true endgame to the true culprit's plan was the murder of their accomplice, Yamada. Using one of the hammers in the art storage room. That covers everything from this case, and the one who created and executed the plan was... Celeste You lose. Let's begin. The case began with Ogami inviting 3 people to meet her in the rag room. Hagakure, Fukawa, and Togami. Of the 3 of them, Fukawa was the first to enter the rag room. Arriving before anyone else, she hid herself somewhere in the room. Her hiding place was inside the rec room locker. From there, she watched as Ogami entered the room. The next person to enter the rec room was Hagakure. Mistakenly assuming Ogami intended to kill him, he freaked out. Instinctively grabbing one of the nearby Monokuma bottles and attacking her with it. Believing himself to have just accidentally murdered Ogami, Hagakure set to work planting a red herring. He saw the magazine lying on the table and wrote a certain person's name in it, intending it as a fake dying message. Fukawa. By writing her name in the magazine, he attempted to shift the blame for his crime onto her. But Fukawa herself had borne witness to the whole thing from inside the locker. She stepped out of the locker, retrieved the fake evidence, and returned it to the magazine rack. However, in doing so, she slipped up. When she put the magazine in the rack, she put it back upside down. Just moments later, Ogami regained consciousness and appeared before Fukawa. And she passed out at the sight of the blood on Ogami's face. As a result, her genocider show personality gained control. And when she woke up, she was once again greeted by Ogami's blood-covered face. And as you would expect, she freaked out. Just as Hagakure had done, she grabbed a nearby Monokuma bottle and attacked Ogami with it. This explains why she had 2 wounds on her head. Believing herself to have just killed Ogami, Genocider got to work disposing of the evidence. She collected the broken bottle fragments in the Monokuma figure holding the queen. And with that, Ogami had been struck twice with the same weapon. But despite that, she was still alive. So here's the question. What was her true cause of death? The answer, poison, she herself took from the chem lab. She sealed the rec room from the inside, preventing anyone from entering, and then took the poison, ending her own life. Next, we found her corpse. I broke the window in the rec room's door, breaking the seal in the rec room at the same time. However, someone there already knew that Ogami had committed suicide. They snuck out with the poisoned bottle, and replaced it with a protein container while nobody was looking. In doing so, they brought suspicion onto themselves to lead us away from the truth during the class trial. And the person who did all this was you, Asahina. Let's begin! Not long after arriving at this academy, we met Junko Enoshima, the super duper high school supermodel. But she wasn't the real Junko Enoshima. The girl who stood before us then had switched places with Junko Enoshima. She was the 16th student, Muguro Ikusaba. However, it wasn't long before she was murdered by Monokuma, aka the Puppet Master, as Junko Enoshima. Having preserved her body in the biolab, which serves as a morgue, the Puppet Master made use of her again. She removed her body from the biolab, wrapped it in a vinyl sheet, and carried it to the garden. Also, she could get rid of Kirigiri by setting her up to take the fall for Muguro Ikusaba's staged murder. To make it appear as though Muguro Ikusaba was still alive and secretly moving about the school, the Puppet Master hid her face beneath the mask and plotted to kill me. Then, having burned the image of that mask into my mind, she fled my room and put the mask on Muguro Ikusaba's body to make me think that Muguro Ikusaba and the person who attacked me were one and the same, so we would believe that she had just recently been murdered. Finally, the Puppet Master planted a bomb on the body so she could destroy evidence. So she could hide the fact that the body, that Muguro Ikusaba and Junko Enoshima, the person we all met in the beginning, were the same individual. This is the truth behind Muguro Ikusaba's murder, and the person who orchestrated it is the person who controls Monokuma, the Puppet Master. And that's the truth! And the real Junko Enoshima!